Hello and welcome back to another vintage inspired video. It is October, which means it is my favorite time of year. And I know I've said that before, but every October I have a long list of Halloween movies to watch. And at the top of that list is Dracula from 1931. It has everything I want in a Halloween movie: gothic castles, drifting fog, and just that overall moody atmosphere that for me defines Halloween. So for today's video, we're going to go around and pay our respects to some of those involved with making this film, starting right here at Forest Lawn, Glendale, for makeup artist Jack Pierce. And then, actually, before I say his name, I'm going to get ahead of the inevitable comments I always get telling me I said his name wrong. So
here we shall meet Bela Lugosi.
there you go, from Lugosi himself. And now that we got that out of the way, we're also going to visit Bela Lugosi and a few others. So let's get going. We're starting up here, but we're actually going to go right down where that fountain is. You see, Jimmy Stewart is buried up here, and anytime I'm here, I have to just stop by to say hello. The man who defined the iconic appearance of Universal's classic monsters. This is the grave of Jack Pierce, buried here alongside his wife, Blanche. He's considered one of the pioneers of cinema in the 20th century with the makeup he did for many monster films, including Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Wolfman, just to name a few. He's largely to credit for the success of these films. His time-consuming techniques offered realism and elevated what could have felt like cheap horror into a new respected genre. Pierce didn't actually do Bela's makeup for Dracula, but he did have a hand in it. He had designed the look for the role, but Bela, after years of playing Dracula on the stage and doing his own makeup, preferred to handle it for the film as well. Pierce did, however, design a greenish grease paint that was used on his face. His method to build up facial features with layers of cotton and other materials was his preferred method, though he did incorporate latex pieces at times, such as with Lon Chaney Jr.'s nose and the Wolfman. Hollywood legend has it the two men did not get along due to the arduous application process that involved 5 to 6 hours of application and gluing thousands of strands of yak hair to Chaney, and then using a hot iron to singe it. The on-camera transformation for that film took around 10 hours to prep and shoot for just a few seconds of screen time. In 1946, he was unceremoniously fired from Universal, in part to his working style and testy relationships. He was an innovator of the field, and he died at the age of 79 in 1968. In my open, I failed to mention that here at Forest Lawn Glendale, we're also going to be visiting another figure from the film. This is the grave of actor Dwight Frye, beloved husband, father, son. And to fans of the film, you know right away that this is the man who played Renfield. He made his name as a stage actor in the 1920s, playing, of all things, comedic roles. In films, he was typecast as the wild-eye villain, but into the 1940s, he continued to appear in theatrical productions ranging from comedies to musicals.
And I could see that there were thousands of rats.
In addition to starring as Renfield and Dracula, he played Fritz and Frankenstein, and Carl and the Bride of Frankenstein, which was supposed to be a larger role but ended up being cut for time. He also was in The Invisible Man as an uncredited reporter. I was watching that film and I saw him and I was like, I know who that is. And I looked it up and saw he was uncredited, which I don't know why, because he had a line. I think he had a couple lines. So you could call him a classic Universal horror figure himself. During World War II, he contributed to the war effort by working nights as a tool designer. And sadly, he passed away young at the age of 44 in 1943 after he suffered a heart attack while traveling by bus in Hollywood. We're here for director Tod Browning. Here he is interred with his wife. I honestly am not sure who these three other people are. If they had any relation, there is none that I found. The trade papers actually called him the Edgar Allan Poe of cinema. Though he didn't just do horror. His career lasted a little over 2 decades and spanned from the silent era into talkies. But, of course, the movie most associated with him is Dracula. And there's another one that's actually tied to his early life in a pretty interesting way. We'll talk about that in a second. When he was just 16, he ran away from his well-to-do family to join the circus. And that experience stuck with him. He was fascinated by that world, and it ended up inspiring a lot of his later films, Freaks being one of those. He was a nonconformist who was drawn to an alternative lifestyle and had a disdain for mainstream society, something that was reflected in his work. His film, Freaks, it was pretty shocking for the 1930s era. It humanized those with physical differences. He cast the performers and the role largely from carnival freak shows and chose to show their human side and not show them in the roles they performed in these sideshows. The film was deemed too shocking for the day. There was a San Diego premiere that sent one woman screaming from the theater, and after that, parts that were deemed too shocking for the public were cut, and then the film was shelved after a limited release. It was even banned in England for 30 years and didn't appear on American television until the late 1960s. In the end, it was a box office disaster and tarnished his reputation. He only worked on 4 more films after that before retiring from the industry. His final years, he lived in isolation, an alcoholic recluse following the death of his wife, Alice, 18 years prior. He died alone in his Malibu home following surgery from a cancer diagnosis. A man that needs no introduction.
I am Dracula.
I first learned about Plan 9 from Outer Space from one of my favorite modern films, and that would be Ed Wood, directed by Tim Burton. And in that film, Martin Landau portrays Bela Lugosi, and he even won the Academy Award for it. And Bela's son, Bela Jr., gave Landau his seal of approval on his performance, except for 2 things. He said, 1, my dad never had small dogs like that, and 2, he didn't cuss. And the small dogs one, I believe for sure, because any photo I've seen with Bela, it is with larger dogs. And speaking of Plan 9, it came out posthumously. So there were still scenes that they needed to film. And in the movie Ed Wood, they depict this by saying Ed Wood used his dentist to fill in as Bela in those final scenes. I don't know how truthful that part is. And was he buried in his cape? Everything I have read says yes. But it is attributed to a few different reasons. One is it was Bela's choice. That is what they depict in Ed Wood, I do believe. The other one, I think, is the one that is more commonly accepted, and that is his 5th and final wife, Hope, along with his son, Bela Jr., did it thinking that is what their father would have wanted.
He was a man who took his craft seriously, was prone to exaggerations, passionate, and liked extravagances, and dressing sharp. Not one to be cautious with money, he also lacked a strong business sense and discretion in career choices. He was a stamp collector, voracious reader, and someone who preferred to stay in with his books in solitude versus going out to any Hollywood party. He filed for bankruptcy in 1932, which led to him being further underpaid because Hollywood knew he was desperate. He never let money be a concern, believing that something would always come up. He had his ups and his downs, but today, to horror fans all over the world, he's an icon. This is one way you know you're at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, the peacocks. And there's more of them, and they're heading into this mausoleum, as are we. I actually don't know where she is at. I don't see the letters on here. Taking a guess. And actually, she's right there. How about that? Look at that. Oh my gosh. That urn is just stunning. So beautiful. Helen Chandler died in 1965, but her remains did not end up here in Hollywood Forever Cemetery until 2 years ago, in 2023. And you may be wondering, why? Well, when she died, her brother had her remains put into a private vault at Chapel of the Pines, which meant no visitors. And per her family, this was a usual practice for stars of her generation. And so there she sat for 58 years, until along came Arthur Dark of the YouTube channel Hollywood Graveyard, which you may be familiar with. He, with historian Jessica Stahl, and with the support of Helen's family, brought her ashes here to Hollywood Forever so fans can come by and pay their respects. And just to point out, you may recognize a familiar face over here. If you are a fan of Miracle on 34th Street, this is Edmund Gwynn, who had a very similar story to Helen. He was also at Chapel of the Pines and was brought here. According to Helen's family, she was a fearless, independent woman. They also said the role that most closely matched her personality was Monica in the movie Christopher Strong. Due to her mother's very strong insistence, her and her brother started acting at a young age. Her brother rebelled and quit, but Helen stuck with it and made her Broadway debut at 12. Her film debut came 9 years later. She starred in numerous films, plays, and performed on the radio, but is probably best known as Mina in Dracula.
It's all the truth. Dracula.
Dracula? What's he done to you today? Tell me.
Also very beautiful. They did a great job with this. Her film career spanned 11 years, totaling more than 30 films. Reportedly, Tod Browning saw her in a role on Broadway and remembered her 2 years later when it came time to cast Dracula. She reluctantly went to Hollywood and believed she was not pretty enough to be in pictures. And with regards to Dracula, she wasn't super keen on the part. Despite her disdain for the part, it skyrocketed her to a considerable level of fame. By the late 1930s, her career began to decline, in part to her alcoholism, which would have a hold on her until the day she died. In 1950, she was badly burned in an apartment fire caused by her falling asleep while smoking in bed, which caused permanent scarring. She died of renal failure and cardiac arrest in the hospital following surgery. I won't bug you guys, but you're very pretty. Clean those feathers. All right, that does it for today's video. Thank you so much for coming along with me and paying respects to some of those involved with bringing this horror classic to life. Until that next video, I'm wishing you a super swell day, and because it is October, happy Halloween. There's critters in here. There's 100% a critter in here. He's about to come out and get my face. It was this squirrel gnawing on something up there. Something's good. Nibble, nibble. Get it, get it. Oh, he saw me. He saw me. Let's go.